Greetings, friends. I'm going to discuss my experience teaching English as a second language, which I've been doing as a side gig recently over the past few months. And I'm going to talk about what are the advantages and disadvantages to this line of work. It's something I have some experience in. I've been interested in studying languages themselves for more than 10 years now. I've studied a lot of Spanish, and I've delved into other European languages and some non-European languages, but I never really got beyond the beginner level other than in Spanish, where I really did immerse myself for a time. Didn't really practice it too much over the last 5-6 years coming back to Toronto, but I do, there's so many Spanish-speaking people around North America that here in Toronto, just recently, working at the factory, there's so many Mexicans there, and I'm friendly with them, and I talk in Spanish with them. And I was asked on several occasions if I could teach them English, and I told them, no, I'm too tired to do that. It takes too much energy working in the factory. I don't really have the energy or the time. But then I got asked another time, and eventually I said yes. And I've been teaching this Mexican lady and her daughter, and I've been doing that for a few months, about 4 hours a week. And I only said $25 an hour, which I think is fairly low. I was just like, whatever, that's a pretty cheap rate. I don't want to put too much esteem on myself because I don't have too much experience teaching E.S.L. I did do it on maybe a few hundred hours I accumulated. I don't even know if it was that many hours, but I accumulated over 100 hours for sure as a private tutor between 2014 to 2016. I tutored mainly Portuguese or other South American young men or men of working age, immigrants who need to learn English here. Some of them need to learn it to pass requirements for permanent residency, so there's like government tests that they need to take. That's more awkward and tedious. I didn't really enjoy helping them prepare for these tests. It's very rigid, and it became more about these answers to a test than really learning a language, learning to speak it or understand it. It's never been a particularly profitable field of work, because when I was doing it, and I talked about this in a previous video about my business venture with the language school, and I'll include a link to that if I can find it. Teaching English is something that there's always going to be opportunities for that, and people need it, and that's why there's always a need. But at the same time, no one really wants to invest that much time in learning a language. It's only a few number of people that get serious with it and for whatever reason take off. But that's why it's just an interesting field. You can always get into it, but how do you really develop a profitable living from teaching English? Because it's not by design, it's not easy. Because when I say design, I don't mean outside the teaching world. Outside of working for a school, you are faced with this forest of opportunities, but you're just making individual relationships with people. And if you can have someone refer them to you, then that's great. But really it comes down to a one-on-one relationship, or you're teaching 2 or 3 people in small groups. This is how it tends to go. And what do you charge per hour? How much of your time are you going to invest in this? How long can you really expect the average person to take out of their week to spend with you as a private teacher? If you're charging $25 an hour, that's like for 4 or 5 hours, that's $50, $100, $150 a week. And these people are going to be working themselves. They're spending out of the money that they're making with you. So there's a limit to how much they can spend per week. So you're going to have to develop other opportunities if you were ever to make a living from this. What I'm saying is that teaching E.S.L. as a tutor is really good as a supplementary income, because it's not that hard to do. It's hard to be a good language teacher. Like, I wouldn't say I'm a particularly good English teacher, but I would say that I'm capable enough, because anyone who's a native speaker who's at least past basic education and is reasonably literate should be able to teach a language. that they speak on their own. Now, as a native English speaker, I don't know much about my own grammar, and they say that some of the best ESL teachers are those who are not native speakers because they were forced to learn the grammar. And there's some truth to that, because I don't know English grammar, how to explain why it is the way that it is, because a lot of it doesn't make sense. A lot of it is just getting into the weeds anyways, in my opinion. It is important to know grammar, but you need to know how to use it rather than why a rule exists. It's helpful to sometimes know basic rules, like how do we use an adjective or an adverb, but to get into all these different tenses, I don't fully understand it myself, even in English, let alone in another language. So you just learn languages by using them and seeing how are they used in what fashion, and that integrates the learning into your mind. It forms more pathways in your brain, so to speak. So this is a good way to learn, and learning a language should be fun. It should be something which you get some fulfillment out of. It should not be a draining experience. When I'm with my students, I try to bring the energy. I don't want there ever to be a dull moment. You don't want there ever to be an awkward moment where there's just silence and you're thinking of what's your next move. I mean, ideally you should have a lesson plan, but still, it's like at that point, are you dancing a jig? I'm like, sometimes in the past, I felt like I'm dancing a jig, just like when I was teaching English as a volunteer in Tanzania. That was essentially a gig as a jig with a white monkey to dance for you and try to teach you English when he doesn't know what he's doing and doesn't speak Swahili. And, likewise in Ghana, they already spoke English. Trying to teach English in New Delhi, India, in 2008 for 11 weeks. Total farce and a failure. Now, that had a lot to do with the school, but I was unprepared. I didn't know what I was doing. You cannot simply start to try and teach something if you haven't at least thought about what your lesson plan is. Now, I said that a native speaker should be able to teach English, yes, but you have to have some grammar exercises in mind, some audio exercises. Again, in fact, it's easier with a group of students, like a class of young children, because then you're not really teaching them much at all. You're just teaching them a few things. You have to bring a certain amount of effort, but you always have to balance it with, like, where is this leading? What is the overall strategy here? What skills am I getting them to work on? What is the purpose of this activity? Very quickly, it can feel awkward. And I don't mean awkward with the other people. It's more just like an internal awkwardness. I know that in this moment, I am a farce. Because you're being paid to be there. And I don't know about for everyone, but for me, when I know that people are paying me, adults are paying me to deliver a service, I want to think that I can at least deliver the service at least somewhat adequately. I hope I would be able to do that. But then the question comes, so are they improving? Well, this is what happens, is it becomes difficult to know, because with a language you can't always say for sure. And I'm not giving them tests every week. I mean, we only have so many hours. I'm not going to try and impose testing. I mean, it can be good to sometimes see what someone's level is at, but you're just doing your best to engage them in conversation. I try to structure the lessons between listening activities, audio files, and there's a wealth of resources for anyone who wants to do this. Just look online or go to the used bookstore and you'll get plenty of stuff relatively easily. Dividing a lesson between that and something reading or speaking or conversation topics. But really, we've just been going through a lot of grammar exercises, like getting the hardcore actual exercises that someone had to come up with and put on paper. And it's like, honestly, you just do their homework with them in class, which sounds like cheating, but you also give them homework for later. But really, on that level, you work through these activities, and it's good for them because it's a blend of having to fill in the blanks or understand a question. They have to fill something in. They have to write a sentence or choose the right vocabulary or connect two different words or use the concept, like is this an adverb, or correct a sentence which is written incorrectly. The adverb should be an adjective. They have to change that. And here are some basic rules. So, but never too much learning. Never. I mean, I don't mean too much learning. I mean too much knowledge or why. And maybe that's my bias, because you can memorize lots of vocabulary, like I say, but you need to know how things are used, and that forms the real basis of learning. You can't just, I mean, some geniuses can, but no one can otherwise pick up a grammar book and then that's it. They've learned the language. Now that can benefit you enormously from doing that and studying the grammar. It absolutely is good, but I say we use little bits of the grammar here and there. And if you get asked a question that you don't know, sometimes it's better to just not even, if I'm not qualified to answer it, then I just let it slide. Like I was asked, what is any? They asked me, what is any? In that moment, I didn't have an answer to any, and really, like, I could show you how we would use these words. Like, any person, I could start to engage you in examples, okay, how do we use that? But to just off the top of my head explain any, I couldn't do it. And the other reason that this field of work is only good as a supplementary income is what I was sort of discussing earlier, which is that students are not always reliable on that level because they're busy or they get tied up doing other things and classes are canceled. And then, so how could you ever rely on that as an income? And maybe you can make up the class later, but because classes are canceled frequently, some people who really try to get serious about this, they want money up front from their students. And this is something that my former language school did. We would offer you packages. You can sign up for one-on-one, which is more expensive, or you can sign up for a 2 or 3 person class, maybe get your friends in, and then it's like a good discount for you. But we're talking a few hundred, like we would sell it in 20-hour packages, and I forget what the prices were, but it would be ranging like $400 to $500 at that time, which is like hour per hour is probably a pretty good rate. Like that's probably less than $25 an hour. Off the top of my head, I don't remember. But and then it's different if you're employing a tutor and then the school is taking a cut from that. So that's something that we offered as well. So that was in some ways a good package. Like you have to ask if you're going to make this commitment. It's like, okay, but we need some money up front. You have to purchase it in 20-hour installments or something like that. But then the thing is, you'll get 1 or 2 students dropping out, and like people will agree to do this and cough up this money, and you will deliver the service, but they're going to miss some of the lessons, and then it's like, okay, so are you going to sign up for another 20-hour package? And it's like putting the onus on them to do that, and I mean, you can get people to do it, but I was never entirely comfortable with that structure. It seemed less organic to me and a bit forced. And the truth is that learning a language, it has to come really from the motivation of the learners. It's only going to be good as a business situation where you can be there in the right place at the right time. And sometimes you can pull that off, but it's not always easy to do it on a grander scale. At that point, you just have to become an institution, which is the other route. That's just the other route where a lot of people in teaching go. They just go with an institute, even a private institution, but a school, like a private school is not a business. It can be a business, I guess, in some sense. But long-term duration of people tied in there other than from a purely economic or business standpoint, even though they may be hoping to benefit from these things economically later on. That's not the mindset at the time. That's why most of learning isn't in a business setting. Yeah, there are pros and cons of getting your students to pay front up. They will get you more of an income up front, but then what if a student drops out? Then you've got, like, let's say you have 3 people, they all paid $400, but then some of them drop out. So then you're going to continue and they'll be paying the same, but you'll be delivering the same class. Now maybe it'll be easier in a sense or not, because you'll now have less students, but you'll just be devoting the same amount of attention but to 2 people. But then what if another one drops out and then one wants to continue? Still, he's earnest. Now, what are you going to charge him? Like the more expensive 1-person rate? No, of course not. You wouldn't do that. So out of being basically trying to be a nice person and not take advantage of people, you're inevitably obviously limiting your potential to make money as a tutor of any kind, but in this case, English teacher, which is going to hurt your bottom line. But then if you want to have a more sustained relationship, which could deliver more to you materially over your life, maybe you actually need to be more generous, basically, in the short time. Maybe that's something to ponder. So what happens with teachers is over time they build up a collection of learning materials, grammar materials, all kinds of teaching resources, basically. And they also build up the mental pathways and the strategies to rely upon in their head, they build up a sense of how to go about a class, how to go about it when it's the first time you met a student, how to go about it when you progress to a certain level, how to ascertain what is someone's level at, so where should you start from. And honestly, for me, if someone was at a higher level, I wouldn't even probably want to take them, because you need a well-trained person. But for beginners, it's different. But the thing is that it takes time to build that up, and I only did it sporadically in my life, so I didn't do it for the last 5 years. So the thing is that in the early going, and after you've been out of it for a while, it takes more time to be able to have these lesson plans ready to go and have this understanding ready to go, so that that'll help you in class. The fact is, I've always found, at least in tutoring, I didn't find this always in volunteering because I was so underprepared, but the teaching itself, the time flies. It's not even like work. In fact, a lot of the time it's hanging out with people, and it's kind of chill, and it's nice to be paid for that. And you can listen to some music, like, oh, we're going to listen to the lyrics, and it actually is a good idea, but you get to listen to music, in measure, or whatever other media, or engage in different things, which if you have an intellectual personality can be stimulating for you. So it's almost like not a job. But the thing is, the real job is planning the lesson, which can take, depending on what you're ready for, is 45 minutes of your day or more, an hour, 90 minutes. And you're thinking, okay, I want this to be a good first class. I want them to come back for more, because I've been paying as I go, right? So I don't get people tied up in these things. So you want to deliver well. So in early going, it might take more. What if you need copies? What if you need to go make photocopies? Or you have a printer? Okay, that's great. What websites can you use? There's all kinds of websites. But then there's a lot of crap too. You have to sort out all the garbage. A lot of useless stuff. So there's all these materials for you, all sorts of books you can get. But a lot of it's not really that great or not suited to your circumstances. But there's lots of good stuff. You have to find, you have to sort, you have to pick, write it down on a piece of paper and give yourself an idea of how many minutes you're going to be devoting to each thing. Because a good teacher is able to deviate from the plan when appropriate. Your plan is not there to constrain you, but it should be there as a guiding structure. And a good teacher, hopefully the students can recognize that they keep things moving and they get you using different faculties. But there are moments where the students have a question where things can develop in their own organic fashion, and a good teacher will recognize those moments and let them develop and use them as a teaching opportunity. So it's not a bad thing if everything you plan to do on your lesson plan, you don't end up doing it that time. I'm only doing this because so many people ask me, and it's almost like this is something that life throws teaching stuff at me, even though I don't always, I did sign up for it when I did all that volunteering, but I found that tedious. But then just these things kind of throw themselves at you in life, and it's like, okay, maybe I'll go along with it. Hasta luego, amigos.